So good afternoon, one and all present in the third session of online faculty development program on recent advances in forensic analysis in civil engineering, which is sponsored by AICT Training and Learning Atal Academy during 27 September to 1st October 2021. So now we are going to start our third session on structural analysis of flexible pavements using falling weight deflectometer by Dr. Anuske Chandrapa from IIT Bhubaneswar. Before start the session, I would like to introduce our expert speaker. So Dr. Anuske Chandrapa is currently working as an assistant professor at the School of Infrastructure, IIT Bhubaneswar. He has obtained his PhD and Masters from IIT Kharagpur in the domain of transportation engineering. He worked on the development and characterization of pervious concrete mixture for pavement application for his PhD, which was a part of Future of Cities mega project funded by MHRD GOI. After his PhD, he worked as a senior engineer at Dilip Vilgan Limited, where he was involved in various road construction projects across the country. Following this, he joined as an assistant professor at Thapar Institute of Engineering and Technology, Patiala, before joining to IIT Bhubaneswar. His research and teaching interests include pavement materials, sustainability in pavement engineering, pavement evaluation, image analysis applications, low-cost instrumentation, airport, etc. He serves as a reviewer for several international reputed journals and has published research articles in various national and international journals. His motto, "Key to happiness is the reduction of desires." So not taking much time, I would like to invite our expert speaker, Dr. Anuske Chandrapa ji, to start the session. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, yes, madam. Thank you for the introduction. So, shall I share my screen now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the screen is visible now for all.
Yes, sir. It is visible.
So let me just make it full screen. Okay, so welcome all for this session on structural evaluation of flexible pavement using falling weight deflectometer. So I hope the participants in this lecture might have seen FWD and also might have worked with it. So in this course, we'll just have a brief about the structural evaluation and how it is done as per IRC 115, and few things about some few equations where we can do our own calculations to determine the modulus values. The contents basically include introduction, principle of FWD, deflection measurement, data analysis, development of a new program, and effect of the Poisson's ratio. Yeah, so I think, can you mute Dr. Madhu?
Yes.
Yeah, I think now, yeah. So moving on. So we all know the payments are built to failure. So we build payments so that they will fail at the end of their design life. But in between, we need to make some corrections for the payment or strengthen it to so it can carry an additional traffic. Now, among there are several maintenance activities. Among them, strengthening is one of the maintenance activity where we basically provide an additional strengthening layer to add the structural capacity of the payment. Okay, so this is normally we call as overlay. Now, obviously, the overlay can be from the structural point of view or from functional point of view also. If it's a functional point of view, it will be just to improve the riding quality or improve the skid resistance or make the layer impermeable, all these things. If it's a structural overlay, there basically we focus on the structural capacity so that the payment structure can serve the additional traffic for additional design level. So the strengthening, when we talk about, we should determine to how much thickness we need to add. Let's say if existing crust is of a particular thickness, how much additional thickness of bituminous layer or maybe a concrete layer we need to add so that we can increase structural capacity. Now this the determination of the overlay thickness is done through deflection survey. Now deflection survey is one of the method which is used to determine the structural capacity of pavement and then determine what would be the additional layer to be provided for the given additional traffic, right? So basically, we all know that the payments predominantly fail by three modes. One is rutting. So basically, rutting is a typical failure where you see this longitudinal grooves. It's a wheel path rutting, and this wheel path rutting is not a one-time phenomenon. So the strains are accumulated over time. After several years of this wheel of the traffic, this shows some longitudinal depression. So this depression can be due to mix also or can be due to subgrade also. But generally for pavement design purpose, we talk about subgrade rutting. Right. So this normally we call rutting, where there is a longitudinal groove kind of deformation, which is non-recoverable. It won't recover again once it is deformed. So this is addressed generally in the guidelines. The other category is fatigue cracking, right? So you can see all these kind of alligator cracks or fatigue cracks are generally seen on the wheel path. You can see in this portion, there is no any kind of crack, but in this portion, there is crack. Generally, this is where the wheels will travel and this is where the wheels doesn't travel. So this particular portion is always stressed. So over time, due to development of tensile strains in the asphalt layer, crack will generate. But still, we don't know whether this crack is either bottom-up cracking, is it starting from the bottom, or is it from the top? Unless we take a core, only we will be able to understand is it a top-down cracking or a bottom-up cracking. Because depending on the crack type, is it bottom-up cracking or top-down cracking, the requirement or the strengthening requirement or then the FWD requirement will be different. So we need to first assess what kind of crack it is. So is it bottom-up cracking or top-down cracking, and then decide what would be the further course of action. Next, we have again a typical fatigue kind of cracks. You can see on the wheel path, you can see most of the fatigue cracks, and they're connected to form a alligator kind of thing, alligator skin. Then we have damage in the moisture. Sometimes what happens whenever there is a chance for moisture to enter into the pavement through cracks or from the bottom layers, this moisture will be remain in the pavement structure. They won't go easily outside, so they will remain within the pavement structure. Over time, they will cause moisture damage. Okay, so this damage in moisture is basically seen like a big block cracks kind of thing. You can see this whole stretch is kind of damaged, even though the wheel path is, this is the wheel path and this is the wheel path, this stretch has still failed. So basically this due to moisture. So when we generally take a core in these kind of stretches, you won't get a proper core. You will get a dismantled core indicating it is completely failed due to moisture. So this is how it looks basically. When you take the core in those kind of stretches where damage in moisture has occurred, you won't get a proper core. So the core disintegrates immediately. And typically, these are how the aggregates look. You can see none of the aggregates, you can see bitumen coating. That means over time, the water which is stagnant within the layer slowly removes the bitumen and gets aggregates as more affinity towards the water than the bitumen. So over time, there is stripping of bitumen, and when the bitumen strips, the strength of the layer decreases. Now initially, which was a bound layer with the bitumen, now acts like an unbound layer. So obviously the modulus decreases, and then the overall cracks will generate upwards. Similarly, you can see this is a typical top-down cracking. So here the crack is not going forward, not going bottom. So it's a top-down cracking, but from the top, it looks like a crack. But until unless we take a core and see, we don't get to know, is it a top-down or bottom-up? This is typically bottom-up cracking. So it has a full depth crack it has given. And these are typical, a good condition core, which has no any kind of cracks or distresses. So what I'm showing is this basically, these are typical kind of distresses what you will encounter in a given stretch, because the given stretch may be 10 kilometer, 20 kilometer or any length. Now, before starting any structural evaluation, the first step is to understand the stretch. Whatever stretch we have obtained to evaluate, first we have to understand, we need to make some kind of destructive survey to understand what is the kind of distresses are there and to what extent they are spread. Like for example, this kind of moisture crack may be a local phenomena, or it can be spread to few kilometers or few meters. Similarly, this kind of fatigue cracks may be spread to few kilometers, and later again there is no fatigue crack, and again there's a fatigue crack. So like that. So we need to first understand the stretch so that we can make some decisions later on. So the destructive survey is like a first step before going to the non-destructive survey using FWD. So once you understand the stretch, what are the good stretch, bad stretch, poor stretch, then accordingly it will be required to make some test planning. So we'll come for that point. Depending on the stretch condition, we can assess what is the a requirement for a particular stretch. So yeah, it's a typical aggregate. You can see here there is no bitumen in any of the aggregates. This is actually water, not bitumen. You can see how this has been stripped completely. So this way, the damaging moisture will be affecting the mixed layer performance. So moving on, once we understand the stretch, yeah, Mr. Raghuram, can you mute? There is disturbance from your side. Yes. So moving on, once we understand the stretch, what kind of stretch it is, what kind of cracks are there, what kind of damage is there, we can start with deflection survey. So deflection survey can be done using different methods. It can be through Winkelmann beam deflectometer, falling weight deflectometer, or lightweight deflectometer. So generally for highways, people have done using BBD also, FWD also, but LWD mainly for granular layers or where thin asphalt is there, less than 40 mm. Then we can go with LWD kind of survey. So today we will stick on to FWD using IRC 115 guidelines, right? I hope BBD already it has people have used, and the only thing is that in BBD it is quite laborious, and the BBD curves what we have, those curves are mainly for very thin asphalt layers in the olden days. So there is a revision required. So the FWD is being now used to conduct the structural evaluation of payments. So moving on to FWD. So the structural evaluation of payments has been improved considerably. As I told you, initially we used to use BBD, Winkelmann beam deflectometer. So in BBD, we used to, it is quite laborious. We need to basically arrange a truck, load it to 80 kilonewton weight, and then we take 3 readings for 1 deflection point. So it takes a lot of time to do that. And if you get a very long stretch, it will take maybe several weeks to complete the exercise. So in that way, it was quite laborious. And second thing, the load what we used to apply in BBD was static. Right? It used, the vehicle used to go and stop there. We should note the deflection, and then we used to take the deflection readings, and then we should calculate the payment strength requirements. So there is other drawback. So because static load never occurs on the payments, other than parking lots, all those kind of stretches. So in FWD, we basically apply an impulse load. So impulse load is basically very short time load. It just applies for a short time and then it is taken back. So this impulse load simulates the contact period, what each point experiences on the payment. So basically we can vary the contact period, right, by changing few things in FWD, but generally it applies an impulse load where we can simulate the contact time based on which we can understand the payment behavior. So the FWD principle looks quite simple. Basically, we apply impulse load and measure deflection. Though it looks quite simple, the actual part comes in data analysis, which we'll see later. So currently in India, we have IRC 115, which deals with or which provides the guidelines for structural evaluation of flexible payments. So this guideline provides details on how to conduct the test and how to analyze the data, and finally how to determine the required overlay thickness. So moving on, basically this is the principle of FWD. So we have a pavement, a typical cross section. It can be either hot mix asphalt, HML layer, or plain cement concrete or PCC layer. We have a sub base, then subgrade, 3-layer system. So now basically we have a loading plate or a base plate here, right? And then we have these D0, D1 to D8, what we call as geophones or deflection sensors. So these deflection sensors are made to just rest on the pavement surface, right? And we drop a mass such that at this point we get a load of approximately 40 kilonewton. Standard load 40 kilonewton we get. So this load may be not exactly 40, it can be 41 or 38 like that. There are some corrections to be done later on. So you adjust nearly 40 and the mass is dropped on the thing, so to get a 40 kilonewton approximate load. And this spring, so this spring can be used to vary the contact period. A contact period generally you can see pulse time 20 to 30 milliseconds. If you want higher time or lower time, the spring stiffness can be varied, right? Because if you go to very high stiffness, the contact time is very low. If you go to very low stiffness, you get a high contact time. So like that, the spring stiffness can be varied, and accordingly the contact time can also be varied. As per IRC, it is generally 20 to 30 milliseconds for one pulse duration. So basically what happens when you apply a load, when the mass is dropped on the pavement, approximately 40 kilonewton, the layers will deflect. So this deflection, what I'm showing here is a 2D picture. It's a 2D. But in reality, it will have a 3D bound. So we call it deflection. So it's a 3D bound. So we are measuring in only one direction, the direction of traffic. So each geophone will measure the surface deflection. So remember that this is surface deflection, not the deflection of individual layers. Like for example, let's say we get D0 deflection as 0.60 mm. Now this 0.60 mm is due to stiffness of hot mix asphalt, stiffness of base and sub base, stiffness of subgrade. So later on, we can differentiate into, or we can proportionate into 3 layers. We'll see later on how it is done. Like what is the component from hot mix asphalt, component from base, then contribution from subgrade. So like this, it is measuring the surface deflection. Similarly, as you see, at the point where you apply a load, we get high deflection. That is obvious. So D0 is more than D1. Again, D1 is more than D2. D2 is more than D3. So like this, the deflection bowl is obtained. Also, people call deflection basin. Both are similar. So this is the simple principle of FWD. Okay. So typically, these are how we get here a typical deflection bowl. And we apply load this part. So the whole, it looks like a 3D picture. So we are measuring in only one direction where the vehicles are traveling. So this way we can determine the deflections. But certainly there are few other things to be done. So we'll see later on, like while doing deflections, we should take the data of temperature, data of soil moisture. All these things are required while doing the FWD estimate. Types of FWD. Generally, we have 2 types of FWD. One is in-vehicle FWD and towing type. In the in-vehicle FWD, whatever portion you saw, this portion, all the hydraulic system to apply the load, and this frame carrying the geophones, all are encased in one cabin. So this particular cabin will be encompassing all those components. So this way, this in-vehicle FWD is quite easy to take wherever we want, whichever stretch we want. It is very simple to carry. Okay, and then it is easy to operate also. The other kind is towing type FWD. So in towing type FWD, basically we have a separate equipment or a separate element which is to be towed by a other vehicle. So in towing type FWD, in this particular cabin, this is housed. The loading system, the geophone frame, all are housed in the particular cabin, and it is towed to required distance. So in towing type FWD, it is quite difficult to transport. I mean, if you want to go to a difficult terrain, it's like a very mountainous terrain, all these things, you need to carry it some truck, you need to load it, unload it. It is quite difficult. So that way, the in-vehicle FWD is quite easy, but there is a loading difference. I mean, in the in-vehicle FWD, we cannot carry heavy loads. That's why in towing type FWD, you can apply heavy loads. That's why most of the heavyweight deflectometers, HWDs, are always towing type. So here, there is a limitation in the load. We cannot apply very heavy loads, but here you can go up to higher load whenever you want to test very thick payments or airfield payments. That's a major difference, right? So next, deflection measurement. Now let's say once you want to measure or once you want to determine the payment structural evaluation, before going to the field or planning the deflection thing, the first thing we need to plan the test. Why we need to plan the test? Because let's say we have a stretch of 50 kilometers. The first question comes out at where to put the drop? Where should I drop the load? At what interval should I drop the load? If it is very bad, should I take a close interval? If it is very good, should I go with very far intervals? So that's what we call test plan. In the test plan, first we need to understand, like we need to decide, okay, at what intervals to take the data, at how many deflections to take, because if you're a consultant, obviously we'll charge for each deflection point. Let's say you are a consultant and you have FWD, someone asks you to get your FWD for testing. So we'll ask how many points you want. So depending on each point, you may charge the amount. So like that, the test planning is very important here. So basically, to understand test planning, the IRC 115 gives this sample number equations, a simple equation, and then it defines this three stretches. One is good condition, fair condition, and poor condition, depending on simple criteria. Like if it is having this kind of conditions, we can classify as good, fair, and poor. That's why I told you in the first instance, you need to do some survey of given stretch, take some course, understand the stretch, then decide, okay, what is good, what is fair, and what is poor. Because in 50 kilometers, several kilometers can be good, several kilometers can be fair, and several can be poor. Accordingly, you will fix your coefficient of variation as per IRC 115, and then you will decide how many samples you want. Like for example, if you if you see here, let's say here, for example, 90% confidence level, N is 25 samples. So basically here you will go with, let's say, assuming good section, you go with 15%. Here you will put, here it is 90% confidence level, so error is 5%. You'll put 5. Accordingly, we'll take the Z value as per normal distribution, which is nearly 1.65, and you'll calculate, and you will decide, okay, how many number sample I want to make. For example, here at 95% confidence level, so more confidence level, you will take more points. 90%, you got only four samples. So like that, you can, depending on your section condition and depending on a confidence level, what you want, you can decide the number of samples. Similarly, once we get, okay, number of deflections, now next will be, let's say, like interval of measurement. If you want 25 samples, if you want this per kilometer, so per kilometer, if you take 25 samples, it will be 40. At every 40 meter, you will take one deflection. Right? You will take one deflection reading. Similarly, if it is 90% confidence level, you will take every 250 meter. So now you can assess. That means, like for example, here this is 0, this is 250, so this is 500, this is 750, this is 1000. So you'll take 1, 2, 3, 4 points you've taken. Okay, so you've taken 4 points, let's say. So you may miss some characteristic, which is somewhere here, there's some characteristic you may missing. So when you go for long intervals, you may miss you miss some typical characteristics. Okay, that's why the more the confidence interval, you get more information. Less confidence interval, you may lose some information. So this trade-off should be, or this balance should be decided from the people who are doing survey, what kind of requirement they have. Then they can plan the test. Okay, this is a stretch what I have, and these samples what we basically require. So that way one can decide the number of stretches required, and then they can plan the test. Similarly, you can see here for a fair condition, like you have around 98 samples and 15 samples, and it is poor. It's very bad condition. For almost you take 200 samples, and at every 5 meters you take the data for poor sections. So it is left to the person who want to take the data, what test plan they want to make, and this is the recommendation given by the IRC guidelines, so that you can take this one curve variation, and rest is left to the person who is doing the survey. The typical payment condition requirements. So then generally once we plan the test, okay, you know, okay, at what intervals I should make the deflection measurements, and you have the team ready, right? So now we'll go to the field, and normally we do deflection at the wheel path. So why the wheel path? That is the most stressed area. Like for example, if you do the deflection survey, let's say at these parts, it's of no use because this looks good condition, this area. You will do in these spots where the payment is more distressed. That's where the vehicle goes. So we'll go on the wheel paths, and there are certain guidelines given in the IRC. If it's a multi-lane highway, but where to do, right? Generally, if you see most of the highways, the right lane is where the heavy vehicles travel. In this particular portion, heavy vehicles travel. That's why this inner lane, the inner lane is mostly damaged. What even I have also observed most of times, the inner lane is mostly always damaged. Here also, it's the inner lane which is damaged, where the heavy vehicles mostly travel. Okay, so that way one can decide as per IRC 115 what would be the appropriate lanes to do. I mean, the multi-lane highway, at what lane to do and at what wheel path. Like it can be outer wheel path, it can be inner wheel path, or it can be inner lane, or it can be outer lane. So like that. There we can do a deflection survey, but ideally it should be on the wheel path, whether it is inner lane or outer lane, it should be on the wheel path. So the FWD is positioned basically on the location where you want to find deflection as to measure. The first thing is that we drop the, we lower the loading plate. So we will lower the loading plate and also the frame holding the sensors. So whichever the sensors or geophones are placed on the frame, right, which is retractable frame. So on those frame, it can be lowered and just it is made touch the ground or a pavement. So we lower the mass and drop it. Okay. So here, basically when we lower the mass and drop it, the first drop is generally called as test drop. So why test drop? Because there can be some error in data acquisition. Sometimes what happens, you may have to adjust the load. Let's say, for example, you got very heavy load. Let's say instead of 40, you got 48. It's fine, but still you will look for 40. So you will drop, you'll see the load readings. And sometimes what happens, ideally the deflection should decrease from the point of load application. Right? As you go towards from D0 to D1 or D8, D5 and all, the deflection should decrease. But there is some stone, some particles near the geophones, or geophone is resting on a particle. This kind of gives some spikes or error on the data. So these observations are made in the test drop. So why it is important? If you don't notice this, and if you these kind of things are repeated more and more in your data set, the data may not be good. So first step, you make a test drop and see whether data is good or not. Whatever the general conditions like deflection decreasing from amount of load application, load in a proper range. Once you get all these things, then you will go with the actual test drop. I mean, you will go put the drop 3 times and take the average. Like basically, first is the test drop. Understand the data, see the data, because in the FWD, you are not on the road. You are sitting in the vehicle and controlling the loading through software or laptop. So you'll be sitting in the car or a cabin and controlling it. You will see data, it is fine. Then you apply 3 additional loads to record data. If there is some error, so you basically see why that error has come. You may see that there's some issue in the instrument or some issue in the payment surface. All these things are done, and then again you will correct it. Again, you will put the 3 drops. For each point, we'll take generally 3 drops to take the average readings. And with the drop, record the load, record the deflection also. So along with that, we generally record the temperature of the pavement. This is important because, as we know, the bituminous layer being viscoelastic, its temperature depends on the temperature. Its property depends on temperature. So basically, we'll record temperature. Generally, every half an hour we can take the temperature, or we can take even, if you take every point, it is quite difficult because we should dig a hole, right, up to 40 to 20 mm, put the glycerin, take temperature. Generally, every half an hour, we can take one temperature reading on the asphalt pavement at depth of 40 to 20 mm. Okay, this is what generally it is done. So that way we have data of temperature, we have deflection readings, we have the load readings. Then along with that, every 500 meter in a staggered manner, we will go with the test pit. So test pit is required basically to determine the thicknesses of each existing layers. So as I told you, we need this data to determine the modulus. Okay, the whole requirement of FWD is to find the modulus of existing layers in a non-destructive manner. So at every 500 meter, we may take one staggered, we will make one test pit and determine many on the shoulder side and determine what is the thickness of asphalt layer, thickness of base or sub-base, and thickness of sub-grade. Sub-grade may not be required. Basically, focus on the granular layers and bituminous layers. So this way, every 5 meters we record the data. So once we have all the data, let's say we have deflection data, temperature data, test pit data, and load data. Now the data analysis thing will come. So in FWD, right, the data analysis is one of the most difficult tasks, we can say. So why? Because we have deflections, right? And now from deflections, we need to back calculate the modulus values. But unfortunately, for one set of deflection, there can be n number of modulus values which can fit. Like for example, you took 1 point, you took 8 deflections, like D0, D1, D2, D3 till D8. You need to determine the modulus such that when you apply a load of 40 kilonewton, you get these deflections, almost similar deflections. But that modulus set can be n number of combinations. So here, the judgment of the person who is making data analysis plays a very important role. That is why normally we give a boundary of values which can be used to determine the modulus values. Because if you don't give a boundary, it can give some erroneous values. Even though the deflections are matching, the modulus values may not be practically correct. So that way, some boundaries are recommended so that we can within that boundary only, we can basically give the values and play with it and determine the approximate modulus values. Data analysis, the first step is the deflection normalization, then identifying homogeneous sections, back calculation of layer moduli, applying correction for temperature, seasonal variation, and finally determining remaining service life. So we'll see each step separately and we'll see how it is done. The first step is deflection normalization. So what happens when you apply load? Let's say at this chainage, we got these deflections. Let's say D1. See D1, sometimes people call D1 as equal D0 also. It's left to the people how they will call. Like some people will start with D0, then D1, then D2. Some may start with D1, D2, D3. So basically D1 or D0 is representing the first deflection. Okay, here in my case, I've taken D1 as the first deflection just below the load, the maximum one. So here D1, D2, D3 are taken. See the load. 38 kilonewton, what we have applied the load. Okay, so nearly 40. Again, we have got here 39. So in very few cases, it is equal to 40. So we need to first bring it down to the corresponding to 40 kilonewton, or we need to normalize the data to the 40 kilonewton load application. So it is, we assume it to be linear. So why linear? This is one important thing here. So we should not do testing, we should not determine deflections when the pavement temperature generally goes above 45 degrees or preferably 40 degrees. As the pavement temperature goes above 45 or 40 degrees, preferably we should not do FWD, because here we are assuming load linearity. That means, let's say at 38, for example, at 38 load kilonewton, we got 0.33. So at 40, how much will you get? Simply it is 0.33 into 40 by 38. This is we call load linearity. this load linearity is acceptable only when the bitumen is in linear region. If it goes, if asphalt layer goes too much non-linear or at high temperature where the viscous thing dominates, there this load linearity may not be actually applicable. So still, I mean, we don't have exactly because each layer is different, each bitumen is different. So we cannot tell that, okay, this bitumen is hard, so 40 above is acceptable, or this bitumen is soft, 30 above is not acceptable. So generally, guides preferably this 40 above, you need to do FWD. Generally, FWD can be done in the early morning hours or in the night time, so that the temperature of pavement is approximately 30 to 20, in the range of 30 to 35 degrees, where it is appropriate and where it is a linear range only. So what happens if you go in non-linear range and apply corrections, made some erroneous reflections, or you may not get the practical values. Okay, so that way you need to be very careful. So we have 38. So we basically normalize this loading. So basically this equation. So now normalized deflection is equal to measured deflection into 40 by applied load. So we get the normalized deflections, and these deflections are what we use for further calculations. So we cannot use these directly. The first step is data normalization or deflection normalization for 40 degree, 40 kilonewton. Then this data set will go for the corresponding data analysis of further whatever we want to do. Okay, so you can see, for example, at 38 we had 0.33, at 40 we got 0.347. So this is assuming linearity, assuming linear relation. So once you do the data normalization, so next step is to identify the homogeneous sections. So now what is homogeneous sections? See what happens, as I told you, already you have identified good, fair, and poor. So it's well and good. You have done, okay, let's say 0 to, let's say 5 kilometer, you have a good section. Then let's say 5 to 10 kilometer, you have a fair section. 50 to 30, let's say you have poor section. So, but within this each section, what you have decided based on the visual kind of approach by seeing the pavement, decided. But within the good, some such as may be excellent, some may be in a good condition, some may be in the best condition, let's say. So you need to classify that first to make the process more economical. Because let's say if you assume this whole 15 kilometers to be poor, and you see that, okay, the whole 50 kilometers we need to give overlay of 100 mm. Certainly, the whole 50 kilometers may not be required to give 100 mm. That way, it can make the project more uneconomical. So, the homogeneous sections are a method to make the project more economical by identifying the homogeneous sections, where you will identify some sections having some peculiar characteristic where they can be grouped as one section. So, the good, fair, and poor is for the test planning, but homogeneous sections, what we do is for further data analysis requirements. So, homogeneous sections makes your project more economical and helps in identifying the requirements of each section. But ideally, as per IRC, the homogeneous sections should be at least 1 kilometer. So, why 1 kilometer? Because as we'll see later on, that we determine overlay thickness for each homogeneous section. Okay, so if you assume that each homogeneous section is 250 meter, what happens? Let's say from 0 to 250, you assume one homogeneous section. 250 to 500, you assume other homogeneous section. And let's say in this you require 80 mm overlay, in this 100 overlay. What happens? Suddenly there is 80, there's suddenly 100. Again, next, let's say if you want to know 40 mm, it goes 40 mm. So riding quality will be very bad. So to get a smooth transition while constructing the pavement, 1 kilometer what IRC specifies for each homogeneous section. So irrespective of, even if you get, let's say 250 meter as per your data, it's better to consider it in previous homogeneous section or further next homogeneous section, so that small portion is not left behind. So this way, homogeneous section basically first point makes the project economical and helps in identifying or helps in data analysis very meticulously in a very economical manner. Now, these homogeneous sections can be identified using many approaches. One of the most common used is cumulative difference approach. We call CDA. Now CDA is basically we take cumulative approach, cumulative difference between the actual response and cumulative average response and plot it along the change. So I'll show example later on. So basically we take some parameter. It can be either deflection itself as a parameter, maybe D0 or D1 or D2, anything, or it can be some bowl parameters like surface curvature index. So this SCI is one of the bowl parameters. There are several bowl parameters. We'll see later on. Among this, for identifying homogeneous sections, IRC recommends surface curvature index. In fact, we can do with thickness also. You can see here, I'm showing two graphs here where I have made one with SCI and other I have made with thickness. What you can see basically here, this up to let's say around 5.8 kilometer, it is a slope is positive. Slope is positive. So after 5.8, the slope is something like negative. Generally, this becomes one homogeneous section. So from here to here is one homogeneous section. From here to here, the other homogeneous section. But you can see here. Here also, I'm using different parameter, but result is almost similar. Almost it's giving nearly 5.8 kilometer, it is giving a homogeneous section, although both are different parameters. So one thing we need to appreciate here that the thickness and deflection what we measure, how they are excellently related to each other. So if thickness that what you had collected was wrong, then this should have results not actually matched. Okay, that way the this we can appreciate how they are very nicely related, the deflection values, thickness of pavement section, and where they give similar kind of behavior or similar kind of results. So how do we do CD approach? We'll see. So basically, this is the cumulative difference ZX. So basically, we're trying to take a cumulative difference between the actual response and the average response. This is a cumulative average response and this is a cumulative actual response. So this is some parameters like ZX, the cumulative difference. XI is distance along the road section, right? Like this changes. N is the nth payment response, like first, second, third, fourth, and the total number of response what you've taken. RI is response value. In our case, it can be SCI or it can be thickness. It can be any other relevant parameters. And LP is total length of the stretch what you have surveyed. So now basically this is how we find the AI. Basically, you will just determine the average, okay, average response values and find the AI. So we will determine this and determine the differences. This difference is basically plotted along the length, and you identify wherever the slope is changing. Wherever slope changes, those points are considered as the one homogeneous section. So let me show like this how it happens. So you can see I just plotted on graph here with the previous data. You can see from here to 2.5 kilometer approximately is one homogeneous section. 2.5 to 5, one homogeneous section. Then 5 to approximately around 9 kilometer, let's say, one homogeneous section. Like that, we can divide different into homogeneous sections. So because this is negative slope, again positive, again negative. So like that, depending on those, you can decide. So how do we do this? Basically, so here I'm taking D1 and D2, determine the SCA. The SCA is basically D1 minus D2. We take a difference and we take SCI, okay, at this, and XI is starting point 0, and we will do like all this sigma XI because you know the formula here. Accordingly, you will define all the required data like sigma XI you need, and you need AI basically. So how to find AI basically? By this value, you can find the AI, and again AI into XI will take sigma XI. Okay, you will take this, will add cumulatively like this plus this, then all this, these three, then these four, you keep adding. Then take the average. This is the actual cumulative sum. Okay, we call it actual cumulative sum, this parameter. Okay, now here we will divide the length by the total length to get the average parameter and then determine the cumulative of average or cumulative average response. We'll take difference between this column and this particular thing. We get ZI value or the cumulative difference. So then once we get the cumulative difference, what we call ZX, so we'll basically plot. Let's say this is a cumulative average response. So this value, cumulative average response, this one, and that's why it is a straight line. Okay, see the straight slope. This green color is actual response. It is quite ups and down are there here. So take this difference, right? That's what you call ZX, and ZX will plot in this manner the cumulative difference, and to identify the homogeneous section. Like let's say this is homogeneous section 1, homogeneous section 2, section 3, then 4, 5, and 6. Now in this 20-kilometer stretch, you approximately got around 6 homogeneous sections. So now what happens? When you identify the homogeneous sections, the next step what we'll do basically, we will group the data according to the homogeneous sections. Initially, we surveyed assuming it to be one stretch, or assuming good, fair, and poor sections. Now you have divided as number of homogeneous sections. Each homogeneous section is like one stretch or one project, let's say. So you will analyze each homogeneous section separately, because this homogeneous section is quite different from this, because it may need different kind of treatment, it may need different kind of overlay thickness, HS3 may need different overlay thickness, so like that. The requirements are different, so we'll be dealing with different kind of for homogeneous section 1, thickness will be different, the total thickness will be different. Homogeneous section 2, thickness again it will be different, so like that. So you will analyze each homogeneous section separately. Okay, so that means we'll basically group the data depending on the homogeneous sections. So once we have grouped data into the homogeneous sections, the next step is that you need to back calculate the layer modeling. That is corresponding to each homogeneous section, we'll start back calculating layer modeling. Okay, so the layer modeling is back calculated based on the deflection of the FWD. Whatever deflection you got, you need to back calculate. So why the word back calculate? Here we don't know the modulus, but we know deflection. So we are trying to predict. So actually it's a predictive method. It's not an actual method. We're trying to predict. So there's some error involved. So if you do some mistakes, you may end up in high error. If you're practical enough to decide the modular values, error will be less. So like that, the practicality of the person who is doing design plays a very important role here. So thickness of different layers of existing pavement is equal to back calculate. That's why we made a test pit. By doing test pit, we can determine the thickness of each layers and then group it according to the homogeneous sections. So there are several applications to do back calculation. So even later on we will show that we have used Bosniak theory to do back calculation. So there are different softwares like L-mode where there is a pattern matching method. So we can also use many other methods to determine the back or to back calculate the modulus. IS 115 recommends KGP back. Okay, KGP back as a software or a program to back calculate the modeling values. So KGP back works on the principle of genetic algorithm. So we'll see how will KGP back works. So basically, the KGP back has two things. One is genetic algorithm and an IIT paper. So here we will basically feed some values. We'll feed deflection values, we'll feed the load values, and we'll feed required pressure on these values. Then it will basically, within a given boundary of deflection of the modulus values, it will start searching which set of modulus values, like bituminous moduli, granular moduli, subgrade moduli, which set is giving the best matching with deflection what you have measured in the field. Because here you need to basically match. Let's say you got D01 value in the field, then D0 predicted. And again D1 in the field, then D1 predicted. So you need to basically minimize the error between the D0 predicted and D0 measured. So that way this KGP bags keeps iterating until you will get the best match. So generally, if you see most of the guidelines like FSWA, they will require that approximately 2% error per sensor. That means 2% error is allowed in the prediction, like 14% total. Okay, if there are 7 sensors, 14% total can be allowed. So like that, we'll run this program, iteratively until the error is minimized. If error is minimized, yes, report the modulus values. If not, then again it goes back to ITPay, right? Then it will back calculate the values, match the deflections. Is it matching or approximately matching? Error is minimum. Yes, again it goes back. So the cycles continues until you get the proper modulus values, which is actually having deflection similar to the measured deflections. So as I told you, we have to give some boundary values. So this requires some particular boundary value or some scope. So to identify the approximate values. So as I told you, depending on the good, fair, and poor section, for a bituminous overlay, these are typical range of modulus what we can input. So this is basically the search space. We can call it a search space where the program searches between these boundary only. It won't go beyond 1500 or 2000. Within this boundary, it will look what would be the best bituminous modulus, such that your D0 all are matching with your D0 D1 matching with object. Again, for granular also, this is a boundary. For subgrade, this is a boundary. So like this, these boundaries are given because you don't give the boundary. The ITPay or KGP back, we can predict any values like 10,000, 15,000, so like that. So you can just make some simple exercise while you're doing some calculations. If you give, let's say, 10,000 to 15,000 megapascal, let's say, still you get the values, but those are obviously not practical. That's why these guidelines are given so that uniformity is maintained across all the designers and all the consultants. So again, the fair and poor is given here. Like for fair and poor section, the values remain similar, like 400, 1500 megapascal, 100 to 500, 22. So for these two layers, there is no much change in respect to section. Only the bituminous layer modulus will decrease if it's a fair and poor section. So this way, the KGP bag will take the seed values or okay, and within the given search space, it will identify what is the best combination of bituminous modulus, granular modulus, subgrade modulus, so that the error is minimized. What error? Difference between D0 measured and D0 predicted. So all these things actually happen in the background, so we cannot see it. So finally, the output will be the modulus values. So in the background, it does all these kind of iterations and gives you the appropriate modulus values. Okay. So as well, typical this modulus range, like for this physics. So this what commonly we adopt. So let's say, for example, this deflection we have measured. Let's say, okay, like D0 is 0.6010 and D300. D300 means at 300 mm from the point of load application. D600, 600 mm from the point of load application. Then 900 mm from point of load application. But around from the point of load application, 1.8 meter, we have taken these many points. So now let's say, if I run the back calculation and if we compare, this is how we get. For example, if you see, this is what the blue color is measured. This is what we measured. This is what we got. You can see how they are matching. This is how we can match the values what we got and what we didn't get. So initially, you may get a very high error, and as you do iterations, finally the error is minimized, so that you get a almost matching measured and calculated values of deflections. So the KGP bag doesn't gives you these values. We have to put the layer in the ITPay and then do it. So that is one method. KGP bag doesn't gives you directly what is the deflection calculated from the proposed from the predicted modulus values. So then a typical KGP bag, maybe someone of you all might have already seen this. I'll just show this. So basically, this is what the KGP bag home screen looks like. So we need to basically put the standard values. So like 40 kilonewton and 0.56. That's why we need to normalize data. If you don't normalize, your deflections won't be corresponding to 40 kilonewton. And the stair pressure is 0.56 because the plate diameter is 150 mm. What you apply the loading plate. So then we will basically find the pressure correspond 40 kilonewton, we get 0.56 megapascal. And certainly, even the plate diameter has a very significant effect. Some FWD are having 450 diameter plate, some are having 600 So when you want to do with a granular layers or a granular materials, you will go with a bigger plate. Simply because if you go for very smaller plate, the layer is compressed, which is actually not the correct way to measure the deflections. So when it is an unbound layer, you need to go with a bigger plate. It's a bound layer, you can go with a smaller plate, like 30 centimeter dia, generally what we adopt. Once you give the values, you input the values, this one, and you press the enter, it asks you how much deflection points you have measured. Like it can, because there are different sensor configurations. Some are having 4 sensors, some are having 9 sensors, some are having 7. So one can have different kind of configurations. So we can first put how many deflections we want, then we will print or we need to add at what radial distance, because some FWDs come with 0, right? Then 200, then 300, then 450, okay, 600, so like that. So in that case, you need to properly enter at what distances you are measured deflections. Okay. Then once you measure, you'll put deflections. These deflections are basically normalized. They are normalized deflections. So this exercise you should do for each point. Let's say, for example, for one homogeneous section, if you have 50 points, 50 times you should enter data separately. We'll come for that point later on. Input deflection here. In input deflection, it will ask you, okay, give me the payment inputs, the thickness values. That's why I told you, for each homogeneous section, you will have one thickness. Let's say for homogeneous section, one particular thickness of bituminous layer, one thickness of granular layer, one thickness of subgrade. We'll see later on in the one example that how it is done. Because along the road, thickness may not be always constant, or it may be having 5 to 10 difference, or even sometimes if some stretch has taken some new overlay, thickness will change. So accordingly, you can take the average thickness for a given homogeneous section, okay, or in the worst case, the lowest thickness as per your convenience, and you can put the particular values in here. So obviously, you have bituminous layer and base layer or granular layer. Subgrade is not there. Subgrade already semi-infinite. Then we'll put the Poisson ratio. This is what I had suggest. So we can put those similar values, but yes, Poisson ratio has a significant effect on the layer modeling. We'll see later on how it is affecting. So like this, once you put these values, right now, these values are actually fed into the IIT PIP in the background. It is fed and it iterates, calculates within this particular range of modulus what you have given. Since it is fair section, I have given 400 to 1500, 100 to 500, 20 to 100. There is bituminous modulus, granular modulus, and subgrade modulus. So when you give these modulus values, the program genetic algorithm will search within this space, within this boundary, and determine the best combination of 3 values. So once you do, you get an output in a notepad. So the 3 layers were there. You had a load of 40 kilonewton and measure of 0.56, 7 deflection points, deflections what you had actually entered, and what distance you had measured, your thicknesses, Poisson ratio, the boundary values, and finally the modulus. So you can see here 1,4 it's giving near the upper boundary, again near the upper boundary, near the upper boundary. So sometimes what we can observe is that most of the time KGB bag gives in the upper boundary. Like for example, let's say if you make this value as 3000, still you will get a value, still you get a result. In that case, this modulus will be quite higher. That's why I told you one has to understand the section first and give an approximate boundary. If we give too high boundaries, we get a too high modulus values, which will not be actually correct. So that's why guidelines has been given just to make this aspect quite simple. Okay. So once we do this, then what we'll do, we'll basically, okay, for one homogeneous section, for 1 point. So this is for 1 point, one point like this. So yeah, for 1 point, we got the values. Similarly, we go for this for every point. we do the same exercise. Okay, and we get lot of modulus values. That means for each set of deflection, we get 3 modulus values. So, for each homogeneous section, we'll be having several modulus values. Okay, for each homogeneous section, we'll be having several modulus values. So once you do that, what you will do basically, so you will basically apply correction for temperature and the moisture. Why? Because as we know, when you're measuring the FWD, temperature was not constant. It was not same throughout your. Somewhere it was 20, somewhere it was 30, somewhere 35, somewhere 38. So you need to bring it down to standard temperature. Now, as we know, 35° is what we consider as a standard temperature for Indian payment, average temperature. So we need to bring it down all the modulus values, okay, to the value corresponding to 35°. So one thing you can observe here, we are not correcting deflections. In the BBD, we used to correct the deflections for temperature and moisture. But in FWD, we are correcting the deflection only for the load. The modulus, what we back calculate, we are correcting it for the correcting it for temperature. So that is quite more appropriate because the modulus is what more dependent on temperature. Then is a deflection comes, right? So 35° is what we considered as a typical standard temperature. So field payment temperature higher than 35° results in lower modulus. Field payment temperature lower than 35° results in higher modulus. So obviously we know that, let's say if you do a 20° and the field temperature and you get a very stiff bituminous layer, you get a very high modulus values. If you do at 40°, you get a low modulus value. So you have to bring it down 35°. This equation is what proposed by IRC to determine the correction factor. Obviously, it's a regression equation. It is bound to change depending on the new data what we get or recent research what we do. Depending on that, these factors or this equation may change. Currently, this is what the IRC recommends. So like ET1 is equal to lambda into ET2. Here T1 is 35°. T2 is corresponding to field temperature. So whatever modulus you got corresponding to your field temperature, that modulus you will put here, and lambda you will determine a correction factor here. Like T1 is your 35°, T2 is your field temperature. It can be 35 or it can be 40, 38, 39, 20, 25, any number. Okay, but preferably not more than 40 because more than 40, it's quite, your modulus values may be quite very different. Okay, it can become like, it can become too high, okay, which is actually not correct. So you'll apply the correction factors for the bituminous modulus for temperature. Then what you will do basically, you will go for the correction for the moisture. But certainly the bituminous layer does not require correction for the moisture. You will go for the subgrade layer and the granular layer because their properties are a modulus depends on the moisture. So seasonal correction you apply. Generally, when you do FWD, we generally note at what month the testing was done. Is it December? Is it October? Is it November? Whatever month we do. Why? Because here it is required. So basically, whatever modulus you are calculating, so you'll put E granular summer again here. You'll predict what would be the equivalent modulus if it was monsoon. Again, it's a predictive equation. It's a regression equation. It is bound to change depending on new data availability, or if you get a new data, it may be changed. So like that, the E granular modulus and E subgrade monsoon is predicted. Similarly, if you do in the winter season, it's a December or January, you'll use this equation and then you'll basically determine the corresponding values for the E granular for winter season. So once you apply the correction factors, now still for one homogeneous section, you have multiple set of modulus values. Like for each deflection point, you have bituminous one set, granular one set, subgrade one set. So now you need to, if you want to find the requirement for a one homogeneous section, you need to boil down all the modulus values to one particular value. Okay. So basically, what happens? as told you, each homogeneous section, number of modulus values for each layer are back calculated because you have one deflection point like D0, D1, D2, D3, one set of modulus. Like for example, like this. See, there are so many modulus values for one homogeneous section. Now, for all these homogeneous section, you will represent one, you will take one representative value. Again, for here also, okay, one representative value. For here also, you have one representative value. So remember this is for one homogeneous section. Any one. Again, for next homogeneous section, there is one kind of set of values. Again, for other homogeneous section, again, one set of values. IRC recommends 15th percentile value, okay, as the moduli, layer moduli. So among this, whatever data you have, you will determine the 15th percentile. So you can see either this 15th percentile value you can find using Excel, a simple command, or you can plot a graph like this and determine corresponding to 15th percentile, and you can see what is the value. Okay, 15th percentile means remaining 85 are above this value. Okay, that's the basic meaning of this. So you'll take the 15th percentile value, and then you will determine, you will represent that as the bituminous modulus, and again for granular layer and for subgrade layer. That way, you will boil down, you will represent each homogeneous section by one single bituminous modulus, by one single granular modulus, by one single subgrade modulus. Once you do this, basically, we will we will arrange like this. For example, homogeneous section 1, one modulus for bituminous layer, one for granular, one for subgrade, and then for homogeneous section 2, one for bituminous, one for granular, and one for subgrade. So like this, we'll basically determine for each homogeneous section one set of layer values or one set of layer moduli values, and then the corresponding thicknesses. So you can see thicknesses are not same, even though the stretch is same. The highway is actually same highway it was data, but thicknesses are quite different, like somewhere 90, somewhere 80, somewhere 92, somewhere 94, and you can see also it is quite changing. Okay, so once we do this, now what we'll do, we will determine the requirement of HS1 separately, HS2 separately, HS3, HS4, 5, 6, 7 separately. They're independent of each other. So basically, we will again use IIT Pave here. The 15th percentile moduli is determined for each layer corresponding to each homogeneous section that we saw. So moduli and thickness are fed into IIT Pave to determine the rectangle fatigue strength. So now what we do, you know, this is the existing modulus of bituminous layer, granular layer, and subgrade layer. This is the existing thickness of bituminous layer and of the granular layer. So you'll put this thing as a three-layer system in the IIT Pave and determine the corresponding tensile strain and retting strain. There is a critical what you get from IIT Pave, and from this tensile strain, all these things you'll determine the fatigue life, right? I mean this fatigue life and retting life. So with these equations, you will determine the strains here. You know what modulus you have got for bituminous layer for HS1 or for HS2 or for HS3, any kind of particular layer. You know epsilon T from IIT Pave, right? You will determine what is the remaining fatigue life. Similarly, you know what is epsilon V from IIT Pave. You will find the remaining retting life. So now, once you do that exercise, so you will see this is the remaining life. Generally, flexible pavement fatigue life is less than retting life in general. So you get this kind of data set here. You can see each homogeneous section is having different kind of remaining life depending on their back-calculated modulus, depending on their layer thicknesses. So once you do this, basically, we can understand. Okay, we can now assess. Okay, which homogeneous section requires overlay or which not require overlay. All these things. Like for example, let's say I want a design track of 50 MSA. I want to design 50 MSA, but here all are having a remaining life less than 50 MSA. See, among though retting is more, we look into the lowest one. Fatigue life is less than the 50 MSA. It needs some strengthening so it can carry the 50 MSA traffic. So now, so basically what we do, we will basically design the overlay. But now for 50 MSA, this is the allowable fatigue strain allowable wetting strain. So basically again, you put 50 MSA value here, right? 50 MSA value here, determine the epsilon T, determine the epsilon T here and MR. Now this MR, be careful, it is not the value of new layer, it is the value of the old layer only, because we are assuming the new overlay and the existing bituminous layer are perfectly bonded. That means there is a single layer action. So still the tensile strain are measured at the bottom of existing bituminous layer only, not on the bottom of new overlay what we are placing. So this layer remains whatever you back calculated, this will calculate. And let's say I got 198.475, a wetting strain and 180. Now, once you do this, you will model the payment in ITPave as a 4-layer system to find the overlay thickness. So basically, here you can see this standard modulus, what IRC recommends, the Poisson ratio, the thickness, assuming 90 mm. Okay. Now, these are existing modulus, what we have got from the homogeneous section, to the Poisson ratio, what IRC recommends, thickness, what you have got from the fit. To do all these inputs, and you can see here, I am measuring the tensile strain in the bottom of existing bituminous layer. So why this layer and this layer are completely bonded? So the new overlay does not take any tension. Tension is taken by the existing asphalt layer only. So we determine the tensile strain at the bottom of existing bituminous layer and see that we got 193 and 227. Since critical is less than the allowable, like 198 is allowable, critical is 193. So assumed 90 is safe for this homogeneous section. But for this homogeneous section, HS2, it will be different. So for homogeneous section 1, so we found that 90 is fine because it is coming safer. So this way, the typical exercise is done to determine the overlay thickness. Okay. So now let us take a 5 minutes break. Then we will further study some equations, right, and some effect of Poisson ratio on the back calculation of the values. Right? Yeah, Dr. Madhulisha,
Yes, sir. Yes.
shall we take a break of 5 minutes?
Yes, sir. Sure. Sure, sir.
Okay.
After 5 minutes.
So yes, yeah, yes, we'll come back in 5 minutes, participants. Yeah. think we'll resume the session now. So let me just share one Excel sheet where I can show you some calculations regarding this. Just stop sharing the presentation. So let us see this one simple Excel sheet where I have made some calculations of FWD, what we discussed in show. So basically, let's say, let me just show you. Yeah, so this is what data we have got, let's say, like changes, corresponding deflections we have got, right? Already this is already normalized. Let's assume it is normalized. So once we normalize, we have to find the homogeneous sections. So why homogeneous sections? This particular data is corresponding for a 20-kilometer stretch. So this is a 20-kilometer road. Okay, so this 20 kilometer, there can be many number of homogeneous sections. Keeping in mind that 1 kilometer as a minimum length of the homogeneous section. So we have determined the homogeneous section using CDA approach, what discussed in the slide. So we get this graph already shown. So we have got this homogeneous section. So now what we'll do basically, once we get this homogeneous section, we will determine these modulus values corresponding to each homogeneous section. Let me show this here. Yeah. Here, from this to this, I have one homogeneous section. From this to this, I have other homogeneous section. So once I do this, I determine the modulus values for bituminous layer, granular layer, subgrade layer, and I have temperature thing here. You can see 31 degree, 31.2, 33. None of them are like 35 degrees. So I need to basically correct them. Okay, corresponding to 35 degrees. You can see at 31.2 degree, I got 1479.6 from KGP back, but corresponding to 35 degrees, it is reduced. It becomes 1256 because obviously higher temperature, the bitumen modulus decreases. So this we have seen already. So we got this bitumen correction. Similarly, whatever modulus we measured, right? It is some, let's say, is a particular month. So corresponding to monsoon region, it is reducing. You can see it's 489.1 what we got. Now applying the correction for the seasonal variation, we get 389.10. Similarly for subgrade. So now once you determine for one homogeneous section, you have approximately 19 set of modulus, so 19 values. Okay. Now to represent this homogeneous section with one value of bituminous modulus, we take this 15%. We can see here, we use this command 15% to determine, to determine the particular value, like for bituminous layer, for granular layer, for subgrade layer. So similarly for homogeneous section 2. So you can see the difference here. For section 1, it was 1247.2, and section 2, it was 680.80. Actually, in site, homogeneous section 2 was very badly damaged. That's why it is giving very low values. So this you can appreciate how the data analysis is linked to the actual condition of what you get in the site. So we got something around like 680 mm as the values in the for the bituminous layer, 133. So this value we put in the IIT PAVE, then calculate the remaining life, and then decide whether the overlay is required or not. So these are the typical design is made as per IRC 115. But still in KGP back, the one drawback what normally we get is that we need to input these values for each point. Okay, even though there are some companies have been developed some modified version where they can input in bulk, but still many firms use where you input these values single individually. You input first, determine this modulus set, then put here, then again input this set, then again place here, again this set. I mean, you cannot put in a batch wise. If you put in a batch wise, it's very simple. You can do it in 5 minutes or 10 minutes, like I said. But here, when you have very long stretch, you should do individually each data point, type it, okay, enter the required data set, again do that exercise. It is quite laborious, and obviously it is quite time consuming. Okay, so other than that, KGP bag does not give you the deflection values, what were actually calculated after you determine the modulus values. Like I showed you in this particular graph. We stop share this Excel sheet. Yeah, I showed you this particular chart here. So the KG bag does not give you the deflections what actually calculated once you based on your modulus what you had back calculated. So with those kind of things, we also try to develop one simple program in IT Bhubaneswar using Bosniak-Podemark transformation theory. So basically, in this theory, we use Bosniak's equations. They're quite very old equations, we can say. So those equations we have used and came up with one MATLAB program, which can basically analyze data, any number of data within, let's say, 5 minutes. We get the data very fast. So basically, these are the equations. I'll go later on how this works. And along with this, now with this equation, you can determine what is the contribution of bituminous layer, contribution of granular layer, contribution of subgrade layer for the surface deflection. As I told you, in FWD, we get surface deflection. So the contribution of bituminous layer, contribution of subgrade granular, all these things can be determined using these equations, right? So let's say this is the equation what the Bosniak theory gives. Now this is trying to couple the Podemark principle and Bosniak. So we call it Bosniak-Podemark transformation theory or program. So basically, let's say we'll take one simple example. So this data we obtained, let's say, from different radial distance we obtained, and we have measured different deflections like 0.5519, 0.0907, 0.2713. We got all these values. Well and good. So it is a three-layer system. Bituminous is 92 mm, granular 373 mm, and subgrade is an infinite, obviously. So then the elastic modulus, what we have assumed. So again, this is assumed. Okay, let's say we assume it will be 1277.105, 410.84, and 65. So we are making some assumption. And Poisson ratio as per the IRC we have placed. Okay. So then what happens is basically we'll first transform the layer or the system as per the Podemark principle. Like first transform is the bituminous layer to granular layer, then granular layer to the subgrade layer. Okay, like for example here, the bituminous layer of this thickness of 92 mm and 122.7 mm MPa modulus is equivalent to 139.43 of granular layer of 410 modulus. Like that, we have transformed the each layer using Podemark principle. I think you might have all seen Podemark principle in your payment design classes. So again, this granular layer is transformed to the subgrade layer using and made it as a one layer system. Then what we'll do? So now once we do a transformation, we can determine what is the compression in each layer. So what is compression basically? Now this 0.5519, what you got, is due to compression of bituminous layer, compression of subgrade layer, compression of granular layer. So these three have compressed to some extent to generate a deflection of 0.5519. So that value we can calculate with this equation. Like dz we have here taken d 0,0 here at the surface at distance of 0. I mean just below the point of load application. So give all the corresponding inputs. Okay, so I won't go into more detail in the equation. It is quite complex, I understand. So I'll just, you can see whatever values you assume, like 1 plus 0.5 modulus value or Poisson ratio of bituminous layer, pressure, then the diameter of the plate, plate radius, modulus value of the bituminous layer, all these things they are input. But here the thickness they are giving, thickness of the equivalent granular layer. The reason being the bituminous layer is supported on a granular layer. So here, as per the Bosniak theory, it should give the layer on which it is supported. That's why we convert it into the equivalent granular layer. So we get 0.26, 0.026. That means what? From this 0.5519, what they measured, The 0.026 is a bituminous layer. Similarly, we go with granular layer, right? So we get 121, that is, 0.121 mm, and with subgrade we get 0.3541. So when we add, basically we are getting 0.542. So 0.5542 we got. So, and this is each component from bituminous layer, granular layer, and subgrade layer. Obviously, bituminous being more stiffer, it is compressed less, and subgrade being less stiffer, it is compressed more. Similarly, we calculated for other distances from the loading point, and we got this value. So you can see here, we 0.5519, we got 0.5420, 0.2713, 0.2685. Obviously, we cannot exactly predict. Okay, and for a given modulus, obviously these values may change when we change the modulus. So to get these values, we have continuously changed the modulus values iteratively and came up with the best value, and then we can further divide whatever you got. Let's say this 0.2685, you can further divide into contribution to bituminous layer from the granular layer and subgrade layer to understand which layer is contributing more, which is contributing less, and how things are changing to better interpret the results. So we developed one Bosniak order mark transformation theory in the MATLAB, where this couples the Bosniak theory with the genetic algorithm function. So basically, with this program, we have found that it is giving less RMSE error compared to KGP-BAC, and also the modulus what we are predicting is basically giving a better relation with deflection bowl parameters. So why are we relating with deflection bowl parameters? Because deflection bowl parameters are something from the raw data, I mean, without applying any corrections, without introducing any other factors, you are determining deflection bowl parameters. Typically, we use surface curvature index, D0 minus D300, middle layer index, and lower layer index. So these are the typical deflection bowl parameters what we use. Okay, and these are raw data. You don't do any correction, you don't apply any equation. They're measured. So then for a given some particular stretch, we try to check the program. This is from KGP-BAC, this from MATLAB program as per Bosniak order mark theory. We can see the RMSE is consistently low compared to what KGP-BAC is giving. The second thing, in this program, we can put batch data. We can just load the Excel file. We get the output as an Excel file with all the modulus values and all the related requirements. So that way we can solve the section within 5 minutes, so that no need to input all the data. And second thing, we see the relation. We try to correlate what the KGP-BAC had given, and what the Bosniak theory had given. You can see with the bituminous layer modulus relating to SCI, surface curvature index, the D0 minus D300, we get a very good correlation of 0.30 compared to 0.03 from the KGP-BAC. Generally, what we observe is that generally KGP-BAC gives the higher values always. Like if you give 1500, modulus lies somewhere between 1498, 1497, so like that. Similarly, if you take granular values, granular layer for middle layer index, generally the surface curvature index indicates the bituminous layer condition. The middle layer index indicates granular layer condition. The lower layer index indicates subgrade layer condition. That's why I've taken these three parameters and correlating with these three modulus values. So here we can see we got almost 0.806 as an R square with MLI, and again here we got 0.73 R square compared to 0.34. These are actually raw data. Okay, and these modulus values are back calculated from KGP-BAC and from the Bosniak transformation theory. So this way, this new program can actually basically improve the testing, improve the data analysis, and the accuracy can also be more. But yes, it has to be further maybe modified or further calibrated. Many things may be required. But at present, it is giving very low RMSE compared to KGP-BAC. So then we try to assess the same software effect of Poisson ratio. So basically, we assume Poisson ratio to be 0.50 for bituminous layer, 0.4, 0.4. I mean, when we design, we take it as 0.35, and 0.40, 0.40. But when it comes to overlay or it comes to the affability analysis, we take it 0.5, 0.4 point. So now generally very less work has been done on understanding the effect of Poisson ratio because we think it's a very small parameter. We try to just assess it what would happen. So we first determine assuming all layer to be 0.35 and all layer to be 0.40, all layer to be 0.45. Okay, now this scenario may be or may not be, but we're seeing scenario what happens. So assuming 0.35, we saw that the remaining fatigue life at concentration of 0.35 was higher. Okay, this for 0.35 is for all three layers, bituminous, granular, and subgrade. And again, we can see here the remaining life is how it is changing. But increase in the Poisson ratio, if you higher Poisson ratio, higher fatigue life, lower Poisson ratio, lower fatigue life. Okay. Similarly, when talk about the Rutting life. Rutting life, it was completely reversed. Higher the Poisson ratio, higher the Rutting life, lower the Poisson ratio, lower the Rutting life. And then we talk about the overlay thickness. So if we assume it to be higher Poisson ratio, you get a higher overlay thickness compared to a lower Poisson ratio. You can see at lower Poisson ratio you get 80 mm as overlay. At higher Poisson ratio you get a 100 mm as the overlay for same stretch, same modulus value. But only varies the Poisson ratio. That means what? This Poisson ratio has some effect on the payment life and the final thickness, and it requires some more research on how to determine the Poisson ratio more accurately, or how can determine the Poisson ratio in the field, because we are assuming 0.50. So if it is not 0.50, in reality, it may be either underestimating or overestimating the layer thicknesses. By the way, the things may go wrong. So increase in Poisson ratio results in lower fatigue life and higher Rutting life. So why it happens basically because of higher Poisson ratio. Okay, basically let's say in the case of granulometer or subblade, so the Poisson ratio is high. When you apply a load, it gets compressed. So this instantaneous compression will cause increase in the modulus. So you get a higher Rutting life. Okay. Similarly, when the Poisson ratio is again higher, what happens? The fatigue life is linked to the bituminous layer as we know. When there is a compression in the granular layer, bituminous layer is supported on the granular layer. Since the bituminous granular layer is getting compressed, the tensile strain in the bituminous layer increases. So we get a lower fatigue life. Similarly, we also try to study what would be the sensitivity of the layer Poisson ratio towards the fatigue and the Rutting life. Basically, what we assume the general possible values like 0.35, 0.40, 0.45. Generally, we adopt these values in 0.35, 0.45, and so on. Basically, what we found here is that for the fatigue life, the granular modulus has a very big effect, not the bituminous Poisson ratio or the subgrade Poisson ratio. The Poisson ratio of the granular layer has very important effect. Why? Because the bituminous layer is supported on the granular layer. As the granular layer compresses or expands, whatever happens, it has an effect on the fatigue life of the bituminous layer. If, for example, if you see here, this is for 0.45 of granular modulus. This layer 0.45, and this particular sign for 0.45, yeah, and this for 0.40. This layer, this number is for 0.40. Now we can see how much difference from 0.40 to 0.45 is almost around like 32 approximately and 18. The huge difference is there. Okay. So almost 14 ms difference change in the fatigue life just by changing Poisson ratio of 0.05. That means what? Certainly there is a significant effect of the Poisson ratio of the granular material on the fatigue life. That means assuming simply may lead to some overestimation or underestimation. One thing. Similarly, going to the Rutting life. Now, the recting life was significantly dependent on the subgrade Poisson ratio. You can see here, this is this particular number. This is 0.45 for subgrade layer, this curve, and then this is for 0.40 for subgrade. You can see for 0.05 change, so almost here it is something around, let's say 115, and here it's almost around 75. Almost nearly 30 ms difference has been observed just by changing the Poisson ratio from 0.45 to 0.40. So yes, what we found from this basically here in this analysis, the fatigue life is more sensitive for change in the granular layer Poisson ratio, while recting life is more sensitive for change in the subgrade layer Poisson ratio. And certainly there is a more research required to understand, to assess, okay, how to measure the Poisson ratio inside, or any simple methods how we can quantify the Poisson ratio in the most easy way, so that we can use appropriate Poisson ratio values. Because the 0.5 what we use in the guideline may not be exactly representing the bitumen which is already aged and very hard. Right? Like 0.5% ratio means it's like a rubber material, but the bituminous layer in the side, it's very hard, it is very stiff. Assuming for 0.5 may end up with some errors, or we are overestimating or underestimating, which requires some thorough investigation. So at that, there is a need to further study the effect of Poisson ratio in the flexible payment evaluation and see how it can change, because we have found it's very sensitive parameter and then it has some effect. So with this, I end my lecture here. Some references what I've used to prepare this lecture, and the paper what I discussed, it was in IRC, recently got accepted in the this IRC journal, where we try to study effect of Poisson ratio, and also developed one program to back calculate the layer moduli using Bosnick-Odermatt transformation theory. Right. So thank you all for your patience. Yes, Dr. Madhulisha.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much, sir. The session was wonderful. It was very, very interesting and valuable. So, is there any questions from participants? Participants, you are requested to ask any questions if you have.
Yeah, just in the presentation, you have mentioned about the moduli. This moduli we consider static or dynamic?
This is dynamic only.
Okay, so we consider
basically we are applying a load in dynamic manner only.
How do we get the value, whatever value has been specified for good quality or fair quality, the value, how do we obtain the value? That moduli is, there has to be some technique of determining it.
Yeah, as I told you, we use this KGP back as a parameter to this application to back calculate the values. So basically you will input the values, whatever deflection values you have got, you will input those values, okay, and then you will determine what is the appropriate modulus values within a given such space, which can satisfy this deflection values.
Okay,
so you're basically having.
Okay, so yeah, this is consistent because loading is also like this, na, that around 40 kilonewton you are saying, and then you're saying that
yes.
20 to 30 millisecond for one pulse. That means yes. If we know the distance between the pulses, we can find out the velocity also. I mean, from the geophone, we can find out P and S, both wave velocity also, isn't it?
Yeah, we can determine, for if you want to find the wave velocity, I mean, you should know the modulus.
Geophone, using geophone proper spacing, we can find out the shear wave velocity, and then if you know the distance between the pulses on the oscilloscope, we can find out the P velocity also, right?
Yes, yes, we can. There are methods where they're using seismometers to also work on this.
Okay, so dynamic. Okay, so dynamic moduli based upon the back calculation, and it is dynamic. So it is consistent because the loading is also dynamic. But then
Yes,
Poisson
exactly.
ratio, all the values, I mean, Poisson ratio also we can find out if we are knowing the P and S wave velocity, we don't have to assume Poisson ratio. We can find out.
We don't.
Uh,
We are not
so if, I
assuming,
mean,
but
it's like that zeophone, at times it is difficult to obtain shear wave velocity because it requires accurate placing at the wavelength and all those things. P
yes,
wave, so it simply can be found out. I think probably that could be the limitation. But then if we can overcome, of course, this interaction is for all this.
if you want to find the shear wave velocity, you should also know at what medium it is traveling.
Correct.
So you should know some modulus values. When you want to pass, you should know the layer properties. Okay, one of the layer properties to know the velocity. So geophones will
Whatever this 1500 to 3000 MPa suggested for bitumen, it is for good quality, but it's dynamic. No? I'm noting it down because
it is, yeah.
some things we have to report. No, okay, thank you. That will be all.
Yeah, why? Because generally in the payment design we use dynamic modulus only. If you see as per MAPDG, input is dynamic modulus. In India we use modulus of resilience where you apply dynamic load also.
So loading is like this because we are specifying time gap between the pulses. That means
Yes.
dynamic scenario
Yes,
we are considering.
Yes, yes.
Madam, that will be all from us.
Okay. So any other question from any other participants?
In the chat box, there is one question from Shashwat Chatterjee. What is homogeneous section? As I told that homogeneous sections are nothing but whatever stretch you have taken. Let's say if it's 50 kilometer or 20 kilometer, the whole stretch may not be requiring same kind of treatment. So to, let's for example, if you assume the whole stretch to be poor or very bad condition, you'll give a thick overlay, which will not be actually required throughout the stretch. Similarly, if you assume whole stretch to be good, you may underestimate the requirement of the payment. The payment may again fail. So to economize the project or economize the analysis, you will decide you will divide the whole stretch into small homogeneous sections where you can make all the required corrections in that homogeneous sections depending on the similar characteristic what you obtain. So generally we consider each homogeneous section to be at least 1 kilometer from the construction point of view. If it is less than 1, there will be too much of rough riding quality because each homogeneous section they require their different requirement of overlay. So to avoid that, at least 1 kilometer is required for one homogeneous section.
So any other questions? So now I think the queries of all the participants have been addressed. So it is an honor and privilege for me, sir, to invite you for this FDP program as an expert speaker. And thank you so much for accepting the invitation. Thanks a lot, sir.
Yeah, I also thank you for inviting me and for the participants for their patience. And I hope it was nice interacting with you all. Yeah, and yeah, thank you.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Okay, thank you all. Good night.
So all the participants, dear participants, the session 4 of the FDP is on tomorrow. And as all of you know, all of you have your schedule. And it will start from the 9 a.m. So you are requested to join the session by the same Zoom link. Okay, by using the same Zoom link, you can join for the next session, that is session 4, which is on tomorrow from 9 a.m. And thank you for attending the session. Hope you enjoyed all the lectures like today's expense. And thank you all for your patience of listening. Okay, have a good day.
Ma'am, one small question.
Yes.
Am I audible? Ma'am, am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Ma'am, actually, you have sent feedback attendance. So the same link is for all the sessions. Huh?
Yes, sir. Yes. The link is same for all the session. And there you can write the speaker name and your name, everything is there. So it can be distinguished. Like the link will be same for all the session.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you for your patience of listening.